and chat inside of the chat today throughout the workshop, and we will go through and try to grab the questions and answer those as we go. But you want to make sure when you're posting out messages that the little 2 box in your chat section is set to panelists and attendees. So that way all of us can see your messages and make sure that we're responding to you and we don't miss anything. The other thing is if you have questions, another easy and really cool feature that you can use to get your questions out there is if you go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a Q&A box and you'll be able to post your questions there. And it'll be a little bit easier for us to track your questions that way. If you can't get to this box, don't worry. We will have moderators inside of the our chat that will be looking for questions. So you can definitely post them there. But just want to let you know that we do have that chat available for you there. The other thing that I want to talk about today is I know that this event, we got a lot of people excited about it and about learning about cybersecurity. I'm not sure if it's just because it's the Cybersecurity Awareness Month or if you're like me and you want to be a hacker and you've been trying to figure that out for a while now. But either way it goes, we noticed that we have, it's pretty split group here where we have about half of our Tech by Choice members are here and then half of them are new or returning attendees who may not be members just yet. And that's okay. We just want to make sure that we say welcome and hello to all of you. And since we do have some folks who are not TBC members and a few of you may not have joined a Tech by Choice event before, I just want to quickly go over our code of conduct. We know that we are in a virtual space and we're very happy that you're sharing this space with us today. And we know that you might get a few extra attendees, whether they're your roommate, family, your little ones, or pets. We just want to let you know that that's perfectly fine. We are sharing virtual space and things happen and it's okay. It's life. The other thing I would like to point out is that Tech by Choice does have a strict code of conduct that we enforce at all of our events, especially our digital events. We were talking a little bit before we kicked this off today, and we were talking about Zoom bombing, and there's a few things that we're doing to make sure that that doesn't happen, but there are things that we want to try to avoid in this space to make sure that we are accepting of all people and everyone feels okay to ask questions and make sure that this is a learning environment that we all are looking for. So we really are focused on making sure that there is no harassment and no one feels othered in this space. And if at any point you do run into any issues or anything like that, you can definitely reach out to us at support@techbychoice.org. And I'm going to drop some of this information into the chat, so don't worry if you didn't catch that already. But if you run into any troubles, whether it's getting details after the event or something's gone wrong during the event, reach out to us there, and we will go ahead and try to solve all of your issues that way. Okay, so I went over the code of conduct and I talked about Tech by Choice, but I didn't really go into what Tech by Choice is. And Tech by Choice is a nonprofit that's helping underrepresented individuals know that STEM or tech is a place for them and that tech is more than just coding. So we help folks learn how to stay and thrive in any industry that they choose. And we do so from a very holistic standpoint by making sure people know and have the basics understandings of financial literacy. We have open, honest discussions around mental health. And we even put on, or in the process of putting on, an event to help people know what to do if you face discrimination in the workplace. So if Tech by Choice sounds interesting to you and you're not already a member, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link in our chat so that you can sign up and become a member today. If you do that, you'll have access to our Slack. You'll get more invites and details about events like this, and you'll get to join our events for free. That's a really cool benefit that our members have. But I think one of the best things that I could talk about today is the event that we have going today. We're going to be learning more about cybersecurity. And I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to our host and stop talking. And we're going to be able to switch over into our learning mode. So I'll go ahead and we can go for there and make sure that everything is good and you can share your slides and things like that.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've been a huge fan of Tech by Choice for at this point, it's been at least a year and a half, and I had a chance to meet some awesome people, Vanessa included, through Tech by Choice. So really excited to be here with you all today. My name is Masha Sadova, and I am the co-founder of Elevate Security, and I'm going to be teaching you all today a little bit about what it's like to see cybersecurity from the perspective of a hacker. Let's see if y'all can see my screen. It doesn't look like I'm able to share my screen because of some settings. So if that'd be possible to turn that on, that would be great. But while we're figuring that out, one of the reasons that it's great. Right, now see my screens. Everything's good. All right. So what I wanted to talk about, I want to highlight in this talk that we're going to cover today, was the view from the offensive perspective, the attacker. We are doing a second part of the series that my co-founder, Robert Fly, will be doing at the latter half of this month as part of this October Awareness Month that will help you understand the defender side and what security teams and companies are going to do to defend against attacks like these. So a little bit of bookends for this particular for this particular presentation. As we go into it, please do post questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to them either throughout or at the end as it makes the most sense. So let's get started. Just a quick background about me. I've been in security for my entire career. It was something I knew I wanted to get into while I was still in high school. Started in computer programming, decided I wanted to move into security. Out of school, worked for the defense community, the Department of Defense, and worked on Russian advanced persistent threats, APTs, so Russian attackers and how it related to US infrastructure. In 2012, I had a chance of joining Salesforce, where I got to build and run a team entirely focused on human risk and focused on reducing human risk and employee risk in the organization. And in 2017, started Elevate Security along with Robert, where we are building a platform that helps understand employee risk in organizations and then uses really cool behavioral psychology, behavioral science and psychology techniques to help people improve their behaviors and be more secure in their organizations. But throughout my career, I've been really focused on the intersection of the human element, human psychology, and security, and how we can continue weaving those two things together. So let's get started. This wouldn't be a presentation on hackers if I was not going to have the quintessential picture of a hacker in a hoodie behind a computer. But before we go into any parts of how we hack, it's really important to understand who we are talking about when we think about hackers and what do they want from us. Now, hackers have often are divided into three main categories that we're going to talk about. The first is a hacktivist, the second is a cybercriminal, and the third is a government sponsored. All three of them have different playbooks, have different skill sets, have different goals and motivations. And it's important to understand who we're talking about because they're three totally different universes. So the first is the hacktivist. And a hacktivist is a hacker that really is focused on making a statement. They primarily hack for bringing awareness to a cause and often have political or social goals associated with their campaigns. They often try to get access to things like social media accounts of companies that they would like to shame or bring into light, or try to steal data sets like sensitive documents that will illuminate the deeds of an organization that they don't necessarily agree with. So if this might be, I don't know if this is going to be challenging at all, but we're going to make this interactive. In the Q&A, if any of you can think of a hacktivist group that comes to mind, type it in there and we'll see how your hacker knowledge is these days. All right, switching over to Q&A. I'm not totally sure I can see that. Oh, did I give it away? Oh yeah, so Anonymous. Yeah, Anonymous is probably the most well-known group in this space. And that's in fact the group that I highlighted here. One of their most recent attacks was on various parts of the Chilean government to highlight some corruption. As you can see that they hacked their police department and then hacked the Chilean most wanted and put up a picture of the president on the website as the country's #1 most wanted criminal. So in this case, hacktivists usually tend to be loosely organized and assemble based on a common cause or a goal. Moving on to our next category is the cybercriminal. So cybercriminals are committed to conducting hacking activities with almost entirely the entire goal being financial. And they're really interested in whatever means that they need to get access to data sets like credit cards or sensitive information that they can sell in the black market. And we're going to go all into this in a little bit more detail, or put people in really tricky situations that they can blackmail for money. But they are entirely here for the dollars. One of the most interesting hacks here was the Yahoo hack, which leaked 200 million accounts onto the black market. And here you can see them being sold in large databases, large chunks. And so this was in 2016. And now the last one is government sponsored. And government sponsored tend to be hackers who go into work every day, and their entire job is to try to break in and steal information that would be advantageous to their employer, which happens to be their foreign government. Countries that have some of the most sophisticated hacking programs are Russia, China, and the United States. And what those types of organizations do is they try to steal, like I was mentioning, things, sensitive documents or secrets that would help in the country's political or economic gain. So China's been known to steal engineering plans from solar companies and bootstrap a whole bunch of their own R&D process by hacking into a company, stealing their engineering docs, and starting a parallel company in China. So economic advantage. Similarly, there's been some known published hacks around how ahead of financial trading conversations, there's been between countries, different governments try to get access to negotiation docs to figure out what the bottom line is. So if you're going into a negotiation with a house to buy a house, and you knew someone's bottom price that they're willing to go to, you obviously are going to have the upper hand. And so thinking about those types of secrets are really advantageous for foreign governments. One of the most prevalent hacks, actually, I'm going to post this out into chat. Can anyone think about a hack that happened in the news over the last couple of years that was government sponsored that might have fit one of these attackers? Oh yeah, Elizabeth saying Stuxnet. Yeah, that's a good one. So Stuxnet was a joint hack between Israeli and US government that attacked Iranian nuclear facilities with the goal of destroying them and shutting them down. So that was a well-known, well-researched one. Another one that you might be familiar with was the 2016 DNC hack. And that was done by the Russian government with the intention of disrupting the US election. And the code names for those particular hacking groups were Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear. They're two different groups. One of them, Cozy Bear, is run by the FSB, the Russian equivalent of the CIA, and Fancy Bear are hacks done by the I think it's GRC, basically the Russian equivalent of the FBI. So if you want to just type those two words into Google, you will find a whole bunch of fascinating research and studies about where they've been and what these two hacking groups have been up to. So all three groups have very different goals, as you can imagine. But there's a couple ones that are much more prevalent than the others. There's a really awesome report in our industry called the Verizon Data Breach Report that looks at all the hacks that have happened in the last year and figures out where they came from, how they happened, and what were the intentions behind it. So of all the 2,000 breaches that happened, or 2,000 or so breaches that happened over the last year, most of them were done by organized crime with the intention of financial gain. And as you can see, financial gain tends to be the very topmost one, that the topmost reason why attackers are breaking into organizations. So we're going to spend a lot of this time, the rest of the talk, focused on the cybercriminal persona and their tools and techniques about how they get in and how they monetize this, because frankly, that's really where much of the risk lies in this organization. One thing that's worth noting here is the sophistication level and the persistence of all three of these attackers are very different. So a hacktivist usually has one particular target they're trying to go after. They have social goals, but it tends to be pretty messy and all over the place. Sometimes they're very sophisticated hackers, depending on who's part of that cause, and sometimes it's not very sophisticated at all. Organized crime can vary. It can be super quick and cheap, and the security terminology known for this is a script kiddie. So people who just buy scripts online and try to run them. It's much more sophisticated, targeted attackers who are precise in getting the best bank account information possible. But then when you go up to government sponsored, you're looking at some of the highest professional hackers there are in the world. And usually they have one particular document that they're going after, or one particular person that they're going after. So they're very persistent, and they're very patient, and they will expend a lot of resources and time. So if you are the target of espionage, that's a tough adversary to have. If you are a target of cyber criminals, you just have to be harder to hack into than a lot of other people, and they'll likely move on to someone else who's a little bit less tricky to get into. So it's important to think about the motivations as it relates to their capabilities. So let's talk about what we each might have that might be of benefit to some of these attackers. And it's a terminology that we in security call what are your key assets or crown jewels. And again, it depends on who's targeting you. If it's a hacktivist, they'll probably want your credentials to a social media website because they want to deface your Twitter accounts or Facebook accounts or websites. So logging into your WordPress is probably what they're going after. Or if they want to steal documents that would shame you. So Snowden could be considered a hacktivist, and so his goals were particular documents to release to the public. Cybercriminals, as I was mentioning, are all about the money. So we're going to talk about all three of these in details about how they monetize this, but really it's your username, passwords, and your personally identifiable information that get pulled together, or trying to get access to your machine so that they can encrypt it using something called ransomware. And government sponsored is they want access to a document. They want to be in your email. They want to read your emails. They want to access your network. So they want to act as you. So they're going to try to get access to your machine, not just your credentials, but to watch everything you're doing if you're a government sponsored target. So let's figure out how. Let's take a look at how cyber criminals are making money off of this. My intention of this section, just to be clear, is not for you all to go off and find a secondary career. All of these are illegal actions and are enforceable by law. So take all of what I'm going to show you with a bit of a grain of salt. So price of stolen credentials. I was doing a little research for this talk. And this is what the going rates are on the black market for different types of username passwords. So if an attacker can provide your bank details and it's verified and legit, that's going to go for about $260 on the black market. All the way down through Nordstrom, which I was surprised is such a lucrative account. There's actually 75 different rankings. These are your top 13. In order of priciness on, or like the dollars they'll fetch on the market. As you can see, things that can lean into identity theft, like passports or driver's license, are definitely up there as well. But clearly, access to your institutions that can transfer money are top of the mark. Moving on. So that's if I steal your username password. That's how I'm going to just sell this on the market. The next are your package of personally identifying information. Obviously, the more information that you can get together in one place, the more lucrative that package is. And a complete set of identifiable information is known in the hacking community as FULZ, F-U-L-L-Z. As you can see, this is a screenshot from someone selling FULZ on the market. And I don't know if you can read here, but it said this has the first name, the last name, social security, date of birth, driver's license number, gender, residence, address, phone, cell, email. And so you can see, you can use them for getting loans, bank drafts, bank accounts, PayPal. So a lot of things to impersonate and steal somebody's identity is here. And you can buy these in bundles. I want to see if I can look at my notes here. But I'm going to pull these over and if you buy a set of 5 FULZ, it costs about $8 a record, so $40 for the bundle. But if you buy 20 FULZ, it drops to $7 a record. And if you buy a whole 50 FULZ, it just falls to $6.40, roughly the price of a fast food meal. So it can ruin somebody's life pretty solidly. You can see this one's a little bit, the screenshot's a little bit dated, but that's what the current market rates are for current FULZ. Now, if these were to be created, if you were to start putting in things like active credit card numbers, expiration dates, and security codes, that type of credential package is going to fetch just under $100 on the market. So pretty good return there. Okay. Next up is the delightful technique of of ransomware and blackmailing. So this is all the rage these days. And ransomware is a type of malicious software. Also, the terminology used in security is malware. So I'll be referring to this as malware now. And what happens is malware, it's a piece of software, it gets run on your machine. Sometimes it's disguised as you think it might be a legitimate piece of software, so you run it. And what happens is it encrypts your entire machine, that the only thing that you can see on your screen is this screenshot. Or you're trying to access a file, and all the files in all of your machine are inaccessible because they're encrypted using this RSA key. And all what you read here is actually true. And what happens is the hackers have the key, and they will not let you have the key until you pay a ransom. So as you can see in the instructions here, you pay $300 in USD via Bitcoin to an account somewhere. And if that happens, usually the hackers will give you the key, and you can unencrypt your machine and go on with your life. So super scary, because there's a time that they really do count down, and then they really will just delete your key, and means everything on your machine is gone. So this has been causing complete havoc for businesses all over the world. Just in this August, Garmin was said to pay out $10 million to a hacker who encrypted most of their company's hard drives, and pilots were not able to get GPS data, and there was satellite imagery that did not get uploaded. So there's a lot. That was a high stakes encryption. Pretty big mess up there. And as you can see, since the advent of ransomware in 2015, there's been quite a lot of damages. It's not just the dollars paid out, it's just how much time and productivity are also lost from businesses around ransomware. The economics of ransomware are really fascinating. Usually hackers do pay out and usually give up the credentials because they'd like it to be seen as a favorable transaction and encourage other people to do that. But the FBI keeps telling people not to pay. So if you ever do get ransomware on your machine, visit the FBI websites first around guidance and best practices here. But one of the best ways to prevent from ransomware is make sure you have backups enabled on your machine. So what you do is you just roll back your machine to last known good state before the encryptions happen. So backups are everything to defend here. So moving on to the next question. I know I also said I'm not going to be doing too much defense here, but I don't feel like it's great to just tell you all how hackers succeed without giving you some tips around how to protect yourself. So a little bit of teaser around how you think about institutionalized, like how you can protect yourself, but how would you do it at scale for an enterprise? So let's now talk about how you steal credentials, how you install malware, how you'd even go about crafting an attack like this. So when we think about an individual, we'll create a fictional character, Stacy, and let's say I, as a cyber criminal, would like to get access to information that Stacy has. Maybe it's her credit card or her bank login. There's a couple of things that I have at my disposal, common attack vectors that they're called, that I would consider deploying against Stacy to try to get access to this credentials. The first is phishing, which is, we're going to spend quite a bit of time on phishing, but that is usually an email sending in your inbox that tricks you. Social engineering is often done via phone calls. You might get these sometimes when someone convinces you and say, hey, the IRS has an outstanding violation. If you don't pay up, you're going to get arrested. And so social engineering can be done on a phone call, but it's manipulation and tricking people. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in a little bit. Using public information against you. Again, to circle back, tailgating, which is walking into an office that's secured and stealing things off of people's desks, or plugging in devices into machines. Now that we're a lot more work from home, that's less of a security threat that we're seeing these days, but it's still possible. Weak passwords, guessing them, or reuse, and we're going to spend time on that one. Rogue devices, again, plugging in USBs or setting up Wi-Fi hotspots and getting you to connect to my Wi-Fi instead of the legitimate one at Starbucks, for example. And the last one, particularly nasty, which is malware. And ransomware is a type of malware. So just giving you a high-level overview, we're going to dive into the key ones and the most common ones here. The one that is not listed on this wheel that we're also going to spend a little bit of time on is also exploitable vulnerabilities in source code and in technology. So let's start with phishing. Most of us have received phishing in our lives. It's a pretty common problem. We've been trying to deal with phishing as a security industry for a long time. So phishing is when I get an email in my inbox. And the goal of that email is one of three things from an attacker's perspective. One, it's going to try to convince me of a scenario that will have me log in my username and a password so that I can steal it. It's not a legitimate website, but I'm going to try to make you believe you are logging into your bank account, and I'm going to track what you're logging in. So I'm going to steal that. And that requires trickery, which I call, in this case, human vulnerability. Nothing really more sophisticated than copying a known website. The second option I'm going to try to get you to do is executing malware on your machine. So download and run a file. Now I need two things. I need to trick you to download and run it. And second, I need your machine to be vulnerable, unpatched, in order for that to be successful. So those are two things here. And the third one is I'm going to lure you into an action. I'm going to convince you to go do something like wire me money. Again, also trickery. In security, we don't like to just say trickery. We call all that a form of social engineering. So some examples. Here is a classic PayPal phishing attack where you can say, hey, customer, you need to do something with your PayPal account. So check it out now. And as you can see, it's taking me to a website that looks an awful lot like PayPal, but is not in fact PayPal. And you can see because the URL has nothing to do with PayPal. It's not an official URL. And so whatever I type into this email and password is going to be sent directly to an attacker. Sometimes the attacker will just, when I say log in, it'll say error. Sometimes they will use my username password, log into PayPal as me, and then present that page as if it was a successful attack. And I would have a very hard time knowing that was that I actually went somewhere else. That second step is a little bit more complicated to do, not much more, but a little bit more complicated. So again, not all attackers will clean up the attack so nicely. Running a malicious executable. This is a screenshot from an email that the company RSA received from some Chinese government-sponsored hackers that were trying to get into their organization. And they sent this email to 11 employees with an attachment that was, sorry, it was an RSA, it was EMC, which actually owned RSA. But it's a 2011 recruitment plan. And 3 of the employees replied back to the attackers and said, I don't think this email was meant to me. It was meant to be sent to me. And their attackers re-replied and said, it was meant for you. And so 2 of them ran it, opened it, ran it, and installed a piece of software on their machine called malware that was able to start moving around the network and steal very significant credentials that then further on led to the hack of Lockheed Martin down the road. It's a very sophisticated multi-prong attack that took months and months, but true to government-sponsored attacks, they had all the time in the world to get to this. And the third is the luring you into action. So this is the business email compromise example, another thing that is wreaking havoc in the security space. And business email is basically convincing you that pretending that I am, let's say, the CEO, and saying, hey, CFO, I'm on a plane, but I really need you to wire this money right now. Could you please do this? And so I'm not stealing your credentials. I am just giving you an account and trying to convince you to wire money to that account. So business email compromise is how it shows up in the business environment, but this is particularly nasty for people who are in closing for their house. And what attackers do is they email when a person is about to do their final payment for escrow, for example, and say, oh, hey, sorry, there was a issue with the bank account of the sellers. Here's their updated bank account wiring, their account and routing number. Can you send it here instead? And so people's life savings just go out the door, again, through trickery. So those are the three ways that attackers think about trying to get access to your dollar bills. But when we think about the psychological elements of it, there's actually 6 categories of 6 forms of social engineering that attackers are going to have at their disposal. I'm just going to touch base on these lightly. There's a lot more we can explore here, but the first is reward. If you do this, you'll be like, if you click this link, or if you type in your email here, you'll be eligible to win. All right. So, that sounds really great. Let me explore that. Morality. So it would be wrong of me not to do this. It is another psychological trick. Fear. If you don't do this, you'll get in trouble. This is a very popular one. A lot of people have a hard time pushing back on fear. Curiosity. Click here to see adorable kittens playing with boxes. How could you not? Trust. Your aunt thought this was a really great video. I think you'll like it too, especially if your aunt's account is hacked and that email is sent as her. Then you have that transfer of trust. And last is conformity. Everyone else is doing it. Why shouldn't I? So you'll see those kinds of manipulation techniques used in email, all often paired with a sense of urgency. This is about to expire. If you don't do this, like, terrible things are going to happen, so you have to do it quickly. The idea is urgency gets you to not stop and think. So the best thing you can do is just slow down and say, whoa, does this make sense? In the world of phishing attacks, there's 2 different options an attacker has, and it's really a function of numbers game. There is general phishing, which is just sending it out to as many people as I can without getting blocked, thousands ideally, and hoping that a subset of people will click. This is not particularly personalized. It's not as hard to put it together. You're also going to have much fewer people clicking on it. Spear phishing is knowing that there are 5 people in the company with access to this, and I'm going to spend so much time researching which 5 those people are, what they like, their favorite ice cream when they're going on vacation, what airlines they like to fly, all this stuff, so that when I send them an email, I will know so much about who they are. Their chances of clicking is much more likely. There's been, let me just give you 2 examples around this. So phishing, this is, the irony of this is just ridiculous, but USAA received a phishing attack to its members that said, hey members, please be careful of this phishing attack. And you can just click here to confirm your account to make sure that it's still valid. So again, I don't need to know anything about the USA member other than they are a USA member. And frankly, if I just email 5,000 people, I can hope that some of these are USAA members. The bottom one is much more tailored, especially if I have just recently booked a trip on American Airlines and I get this email. There's a very good chance that I'm going to click on this. So you can see that here's my itinerary, but you can also see there's a couple of misspellings here. The itinerary is misspelled, and some of the links actually redirect to a malicious site. So they're trying to steal my username password for AAA, not AAA, American Airlines. So the way you conduct spear phishing often is doing research on social media and trying to find information about your targets. So be careful about what you post online. Just quickly overview the finances of attacks. So a mass phishing attack, let's say I send it to 1 million people, spear phishing will send to 1 million. They both will get blocked by technologies 99% of the time, but the open rate for the ones that do get through 1% of the time is going to be much higher for spear phishing because it's much more personalized, much more likely to get clicked. I'm going to have fewer victims, but because I have chosen my victims very, very targeted, I'm going to have a much higher output from them. And so even though it's a lot more work to research, I'm going to have significant profit around this. So there's some really interesting, this is a published study done a couple of years ago on net benefit from spear phishing. So just quickly, the best thing you can do to defend yourself against phishing, because your credentials are going to be stolen one way or the other, because all of us are still human, is to install something like 2FA, multi-factor authentication, that says, hey, in addition to that password, I see you're logging in from a new place. Please type in the code on your phone or type in a USB key. A lot more of this on how to defend yourself in the second presentation we're doing at the end of the month. But turn on 2FA for everything you can. Next up is weak passwords and compromised credentials. So this is some research done by a company called SpyCloud, and they looked at a whole bunch of credentials from millions of people, and they found 28% reused passwords at least once, so the exact same password across multiple sites. And those, so the majority of the time it was an exact match. And then if it wasn't, the rest were just slight deviation, like Masha 1 or Masha Facebook or Masha Amazon, Masha Google, right? So that's a pretty standard formula. Now, let me explain why this starts getting really dangerous. Because I don't particularly care if I can use, let's say, your TripAdvisor account to log into your McDonald's account. Fine. But if I steal your McDonald's login and it happens to just be the same password that you use for your work account, or it happens to be a very similar password that you use for your bank account, attackers are very intelligent about that. And what they do is they harvest these credentials that they steal, and then they put this into a system that tries to log into a lot of sites all at the same time with those passwords and see what kind of hits they get. And because so many of us reuse these passwords, it's not much of a stretch for them to be able to get access to much more sensitive things than the account that was compromised. So there's two ways attackers think about using stolen credentials. So the first is is a concept called brute force, right? And so they take a password that they have, so they take an account that they want to get into, and they're going to just, within an automated way, keep throwing passwords at it until they're able to log in. And this is why having Mustang123 or the name of your pet are not great passwords, because they're very guessable and they're part of known libraries that get published. And if the site that you have is not well set up, an attacker can just keep trying time and time again until they log in. Similarly, if I have your password from a different site and say this is the Masha Google versus Masha Facebook, what I can do is I can see the pattern and I can try variations on a password I've already stolen to see if I can get it. So I'm iterating on it. Credential stuffing on the other side is I'm taking a database of passwords that I have stolen from one account, and I am using it on a whole bunch of other accounts to get in. So we're doing mass. It's not targeted. I'm not guessing anymore. I'm taking a known good password set and I'm logging into other accounts. I'm stealing those good accounts, and it just keeps going on and on. So you can have a cascading set of like websites that constantly get breached because of reuse in passwords. So the best way to defend against this is use a password manager to have unique and separate passwords for everybody. Malware. Okay, so malware stands for malicious software and is the dirtiest thing in security. It's just so mean. And malware exists in a lot of different forms. It's an executable that can happen on your machine. It can be executable code or an executable file. It could be something like we saw in the earlier example, like an Excel document with malicious macros embedded in there, or they are files that exploit an unpatched vulnerability. And I'm going to talk about what this looks like in a little bit more detail. But let's walk through what vulnerabilities look like in an environment. So software is developed. Microsoft releases the latest operating system, or Macs for that matter. They receive, so developers do the best they can at making sure that it's secured, good to go, and they ship it out the world. Somebody, sometimes attackers often, finds a vulnerability in that code, a way to get into that account illegally or without access. They can manipulate that. And they start exploiting that. That is something called a zero day. A zero day, when an attacker can get into a browser, a piece of software, to your operating system, and it isn't known to the manufacturer. And what they do is they start using that hole to steal data or get access to that environment. And the way that they do that is by writing very specific malicious software that executes against that vulnerability in that machine. Security teams then try to detect that kind of attack from happening, and they will then try to close up the hole as fast as possible. But in the time that is available, attackers can take that piece of malware and use it on as many machines that have that kind of vulnerability. And then after the patch is released, however many machines are unpatched in the wild. So that's why it's really important to patch. These are some of the top laws of security. And the number one thing is that if a bad guy or a gal can persuade you to run a program on your machine, malware, then it is not your computer anymore. That means a attacker can do whatever they want on your machine because they are acting as if it is yours. So what do I mean by that? That means they can install ransomware if they want to. They can put in a keylogger that tracks everything you're typing, including your username, passwords. They can change where your website traffic goes through. They can change what sites are trusted and not, including their malicious sites become trusted. They can install adware. They can run the engineering resources on your machine as mining. They can steal your password. They can do anything that you could do on your machine if they have control over your machine. That's what malware does in your organization. So, sorry, in your machine. So there's two main things that you can do around malware. One is update patches as soon as they come out, and two, quit running executables and any files from people who you don't know. Those are the two best things. That's all pretty straightforward, but when you start thinking about what happens if I work on a security team of an organization that's 100,000 people? How do I manage this at scale? Now you're talking about what some departments in security might have to tackle and deal with. All right, last section. I know we're coming up on time, but vulnerabilities and exploits. So we're just talking about a lot of things that we might have agency over as individuals, but it's not always the fault of a person falling for an attack. Sometimes the technologies, the web apps we put out are vulnerable, as we were just mentioning, to malware, to exploits. So there's a really cool resource in a nonprofit called OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, that regularly puts out, and the last update was 2017, every couple of years, the most common ways attackers are getting into our web applications. And here are all the ways that our security security vulnerabilities have been found in our organizations. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. This could be a whole multi-day course to talk through how to identify and search for these. I just wanted to familiarize you all with these particular attack methodologies. But just to give you a concept of what it looks like, we were talking about the direct access. Like if I am the database administrator and I have a username and password to access the database of all of the passwords for McDonald's employees, or sorry, McDonald's end users, just an idea, you can try to trick me for the username password. But if the web application that I am using to log in or host other people logging in and seeing their orders is vulnerable, an attacker can use tools like SQL injection to convince the web app to give up really sensitive information like username passwords. Now, this is significantly more sophisticated sometimes, but it also the bang for your buck is significant, right? You can dump millions of usernames and passwords all at once, as opposed to just going after one particular individual. So usually there's a lot of logging associated with this, so you have a shorter window to escape with this kind of vulnerability, but not always. Again, I'm not going to go through the details of this. I just want to share from a security perspective how these start layering. We were talking about how do I get you to convince you to go to a compromised website. But there's a couple of other ways that attackers can start using compromised places on the web to take advantage of exploits and vulnerabilities. So I can serve up malicious advertisements in websites. And so if browsers don't check for that, that's one way of getting access to my browser and information there. If I go to a compromised website, it can then redirect me to malicious websites and then ultimately get me to download malware or steal something that's looking for my banking credentials or install ransomware. So a couple of ways that I think about the malicious, our uses on the internet to be able to steal your accounts. And the last thing I would be missed if I didn't mention is, unfortunately, human error is one of the top reasons why we get hacked. The up and coming most common ways attackers are getting in is misconfigured services. So if I have access to an AWS bucket, right, that is hosting really sensitive information for my company, like customer details, and I accidentally hit public instead of private, then all it takes is someone searching all AWS S3 buckets in an automated fashion to see what's public, search for some key information, key strings, and all of a sudden, there you go. That's like valuable information on that I can sell in the black market. So it'd be amiss if we did not have nod to just sheer human error. So it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and Tech by Choice has such a awesome initiative and try to get more people into tech and into other higher up positions in tech. And I just wanted to share with you all about all of the nuances of what it would mean to have a legitimate security career, not one where you're selling things on the black market. But there's so many components. You can go into pen testing, which can check as a white hat hacker where organizations are vulnerable. You can go into regulations and law and governance. You can go into security operations, which talks about patching at scale and making sure people have two-factor authentication installed, and incident response and data leakage. You can talk about security engineering and network design. So there's a lot of the attacks we focused on, again, from the attacker's perspective. This is just a bit of a taste into what defense might look like and what are all the careers you could go into to help organizations defend against some of these attacks that we've been thinking about. And if you would like to know more, Krebs on Security is a world-class journalist who has for many years now been covering super cool cyber attacks. A lot of the information you saw in this presentation today around price of fulls on the black market are all covered by him in his underground research. So he is an incredible place to read more about this landscape. And cybrary.it has a really cool resource to start getting into cybersecurity, as does Springboard, and the URLs here will help you get started. With that, that's all I had for you. I'm happy to stay on for a few more questions. I know we've gone a little bit over, but happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Thank you for that amazing presentation. I was a little nervous there about all the information I have out on the internet, but definitely excited because I do have the multi-factor setup, so I am slightly safer. I definitely will start using more of those password management systems, so I am no longer nervous about having talks about cybersecurity. I definitely want to go ahead and check in with the folks and see how they were feeling. Throw in some emojis into the chat. Let me know what you're thinking and how you're feeling about cybersecurity after learning so much information. And while we're doing that and people, oh, we have a question coming up. Do you have any recommendations for password managers?
LastPass is my favorite. Yeah, and make sure you turn on two-factor authentication for your LastPass. It's all meta.
Oh, that's a good point. I don't think I have that turned on. So while we're getting questions and answering some of the questions that folks have, I did start our poll for our feedback. So if you could please go ahead and answer that. That'll help us understand how we can make the next event even better than this one, which is going to be pretty hard to pull off. Because not only are we learning new stuff, but we're learning how to be safe online.
So there's a new question that came in. Should I use a VPN while looking things up like Kali Linux and videos on how to breach Wi-Fi and things like that? So I'm not raising any red flags. Not maliciously, just because you're interested. I would use incognito mode, and that should be enough. I don't necessarily have to go through a VPN, especially just researching. Yeah, it's VPNs are good in encrypting all of your traffic, and I'd probably use that if you're like trying to do banking in a like a coffee shop. But if you just want to obfuscate the stuff you're researching, incognito mode is just great. And what do I suggest for being truly anonymous online? There's a couple of components really hard. Online is not made to be anonymous. DuckDuckGo is a great browser that will stop tracking your searches. couple of years ago, Anonymous published their guide to functioning online. I don't know if you'll be able to find it again. I installed all of their best practices and it broke my entire computer. None of the internet was usable anymore because it's not, like I said, it's not designed to be used anonymously. Incognito mode, DuckDuckGo, VPNs are tricky because you have to trust who you're VPNing through because they're getting access to your data sets. Tor is a really is still a well reputable way of obfuscating your data. So those are the three main areas of places I'd start with.
Those are some good questions. We give a few more minutes to see if any more questions popped up. Tor is the onion router. Yes. This is bringing up flashbacks of me in high school trying to learn how to be a part of Anonymous and Googling all this stuff and feeling overwhelmed and just closing my computer and like going to play The Sims or something.
I don't think you should give up on your dream. Maybe like a little less hacking, but like security is, I feel like security does a bad rap of giving people information around how accessible it is. But there's, if you want to start getting to incident response is super cool. There's also some cool, like some Cybrary and even SANS, they're an online training. If you can get some intros to ethical penetration testing, which is just a nice way of saying hacking not illegally. One of the best and most fun ways to do this is they set up like a vulnerable bank server so you can try different ways of breaking into it and practice these skill sets, all with the goal of defending your own organizations against those type of attacks, of course.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, definitely. I guess I have one question, or actually we had a question pop up in Q&A.
Are there opportunities in Salesforce to use cybersecurity? I think the question is, if I'm reading correctly, does the Salesforce cybersecurity team, are they still hiring people? I'm not totally sure, probably. Or if the question is, so if you want to be a Salesforce developer, I'm not the best expert around this, but I know there's actually quite a few online boot camps that can help you focus on that. And in that capacity, you can also find ways to be more security minded when you set up Salesforce instances and manage Salesforce data sets.
And then we have another question from the chat. What is the service called where you can try to break into a test baking service?
Yeah. So I would search ethical pen testing environments. So ethical penetration testing. Let me see if I can find you. If I don't have resources available to right out of the gate, but I will find some and we can follow up as a resource through Tech by Choice, especially any hackathon days that people that I hear about coming up.
Yeah, I think one that I could think of, I think it's called Hack the Box or something to that effect. I know I played around with that I think it was like last year. So that's something cool. I can try to send resources out in the email. There we go. Vanessa found it. I think Vanessa's the one who told me about Hack the Box. So that makes a lot of sense. It looks like we have a few more questions that are popping up from Q&A.
I see another one about many people are interested in cybersecurity, if they should learn how to code. Do you think it's crucial? No, coding is not necessary for a career in cybersecurity. It is if you want to go into product security, where you are learning to assess code for vulnerabilities. I would recommend a career or spending some time learning scripting languages, Python being a good one to be able to help automate some rules. But if you go into incident response, you don't need to have a background in coding. I do recommend understanding how networks work and how technical infrastructure, how data moves in a network, and now cloud infrastructure at least a high level to be able to understand where your entry points are. But it's not a must have. It's a nice to have. Next question is, do I think using tools to defend our own network, like Security Onion or owning our own firewalls, would be a good way to get into cybersecurity before we do it professionally? Yeah, in general, I think playing around with security tools is really helpful. One of the things you'll find is when you're taking an online class, is they'll create labs and environments for you to try to detect, respond, and analyze to events happening. So the more familiar you are with the type of logs and the detection capabilities of some of those technologies you just listed, the greater familiarity you'll be able to have with getting into the space. So there's absolutely no harm in it, but you can also just find labs and environments too to play around with them yourselves. But it's a good getting curious about what technologies exist, what they do, how they process that information will help you get a leg up in the space as well.
These are great questions. Let me see. Let me double check the Slack to make sure, the chat to make sure we didn't miss anything. It looks like we got all of the questions. We're about like 15, 16 minutes over. Try to give it just a bit to see if there's anyone typing, trying to get out that last message. And just in case you'll come up with questions after this event, please don't worry. When we send out the follow-up email, we'll send you resources about the themes, links shared throughout this event, as well as ways for you to become a Tech by Choice member and how you can join our Slack community so you can ask those questions there and get feedback from other Tech by Choice members. It looks like we got the last question that we'll take for today. And it says, for a person with data science and cybersecurity degree, how can we use both to get a job?
That's awesome. You're already there in so many ways. I think it's a function of understanding what part of security you'd like to get into and getting a little bit more familiar. From the outside, cybersecurity feels like one space, but if you remember that spider chart that I showed with all these like elements of it, understanding which part you want to go into is really valuable because it'll help you understand, do I want to be on the attack side? Do I want to be on defense? Do I want to work on policies? All of which would be great for you to understand how to research. Find the biggest, I'd recommend as far as getting a job, I'd find some people who are thought leaders in that particular category in security. There's been a lot of lists and publications around the top women focused on this or the top leaders in risk management, whatever that, and see if you can connect with them for a mentorship conversation. And there are quite a few resources online for open cybersecurity jobs. I know the Women in Cybersecurity and Privacy group, WISP, has a job board, but there's quite a few job boards that really focus on putting actually both STEM and underrepresented minorities into the security field. So happy to, aside from WISP, I don't have ones off the top of my head, but I'm happy to pull those together and share job boards that I'm familiar with.
Well, thank you. That was a great question, Sandra. Thank you for posting that. So I'm going to go ahead and that will be our last question for today. Again, thank you so much, I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your name. Can you say it one more time?
Masha.
Masha. Okay, I have a friend named Massa, and I keep trying to say that. I'm like, no, that's not right.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun for me to chat with you all, and hopefully it was useful.
Yeah, no, it was really great. Again, thank you for joining. And again, thank you everyone who is still on right now listening to Q&A. This has been an amazing session. And I can't wait to chat with all of you in Slack and maybe even seeing you at part 2. Definitely check out your email. It'll have more details on how you can RSVP for that next event, as well as how you can enter in our Slack and become a TBC member. So I hope everyone has a good night. And we will go ahead and close out for today.
Great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Val.